This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
For the next couple of minutes, while we're waiting to see who else arrives, if you could review the documents, the 4 documents in front of you that are there, and think about which strategies you would like to vote on, and vote, we can tally that. So you get 3 votes per person. What you're voting for are the 3 things you think on this list. You guys came up with these brainstormed ideas, but the 3 things that we really, as a community, need to work on. This is not what the task force should work on. You guys have done your work with the group that we've done so far, but this is things that we think the community needs to work on that will be signaled back to council and will be given, hopefully, to the groups that we think might be able to work on these things. Not that council or the city is going to solve these problems, but really we're going to spend a little time today brainstorming how do we get some of this work happening. You have 3 dots at your table per person. Don't take more than 3. And you need to vote on 3. So for the next few minutes, if you can reflect on the documents you have, make sure you have notes or questions or comments. We will be talking about those. And then please vote with your 3 dots. We will get to the kind of welcome piece in just a minute. But I want to make sure you guys have some time to mull that. Would it be helpful if I walked and talked through quickly the 4 documents? Would that be good orienting? I'm seeing some yes. Okay. So the first document, and my apologies, this is my work, so I'll claim that first. Nobody else has seen it except for the ordinance change. But the first document I'm going to talk about is Ordinance Changes, Next Steps in Communication Conversation. It's a 1-page Word document, and that's the title at the top. This is a summary of our last meeting's notes about the things we said about who are the stakeholders, what are the key messages and points, what formats could we potentially use, and who potentially could be the stakeholder, or could be the spokespeople. This should look familiar to you. This is right off what we all talked about at the last meeting. So if you weren't able to be at the last meeting, know that this was brainstormed ideas, very much draft, but it's the starting point for our conversation today about next steps. Okay, so that's that document. 1 page, 1 side. The second one, which also looks very familiar, is Ordinance Update. This 1-page Word document is an attempt to summarize a start of a summary around the process. So a little bit about kind of what have we done. So we've had meetings. We talked about the ordinance, for example, in details at 3 of the meetings, but more meat needs to go here about the whole process. And this is really language not about the whole task force work, because you guys did a lot of work brainstorming around problem and strategies, but this is more focused on the ordinance. There was a bulleted list, my summary, of what I thought generally we had agreement on, where there was we didn't vote on any of this, but generally what we thought there was agreement on. So there's a whole bulleted list there. There was also a bulleted list around places where there still is some tension. And there may be additional ones. So this will be part of our discussion, because this is going to be likely used as part of our, those of you guys that will be speaking on this, this could be a resource to you as you speak. So that's this document. Yeah?
How do those 17, are there 17?
There are a total 17. I winnowed out the ones that we previously voted on, but.
Do they match any of these bulleted points where you said they were titles?
Okay, so that's a different document, Helene. So way back at our first or second meeting, you guys brainstormed all the possible strategies. One of the strategies was the public good order, public behavior ordinance. So that is one of the strategies. That's this one. Okay? So we talked about. The bulleted list, and I'm sorry if this is confusing, the bulleted lists that you have are specifically related to the ordinance. We went through in 3 meetings, as you guys know, in detail, talking in small groups and large groups, feedback back and forth. These are some of the concepts, not the exact words, but conceptually. We didn't want to have language that says neighborhood. We think it's better to have language that says community. That was one of the specific pieces of feedback. There was lots of agreement about, this is about our whole community, not specific neighborhoods. So that's one of the bullets. You'll see that in here. That's one of the bullets that's there as an example. So this bulleted list is about the ordinance discussions. Yeah, does that help? Okay. In an overall summary back to council about all the work that you guys did, we would include the additional pieces, you know, of that we came up with these strategies. We think these strategies should move forward. Yes?
I think what the question is where are those? Because back here we can't read those. I think that's what we're looking at. Or is that something you go up and read and then we put the stickers on?
So
Those points up there.
these points up here are from a document that, and maybe you guys you're not bringing stuff. They weren't on your table. It's not on the table. I have some extra copies from previous meetings. You guys have looked at, it's been on tables probably the last 2 or 3 meetings, so I figured I'm not going to make a million more copies because you might already have them. I do have copies, so I can get those to you. Absolutely. So anybody that needs that document, and there's sufficient, I think, you know, even if multiple people need them, I've got enough copies, I think. Does anybody else want copies for the voting piece of it? You guys, rest of you good? So thank you. Sorry about, so those, there's more content. So those are the 17 strategies. They're now down to 12 based on our feedback. There's then a table. So this was, I started working on this a couple of weeks ago to say, how can we track the changes that you guys have proposed? Which was very difficult. I don't know that this still is right, and it might not be a good messaging tool, but it was a start at saying, could this work? So on the front side are, all the way over on the left-hand column, is the original language that exists right now. In the middle column is the language that was proposed to City Council in March. Not exact language, summary of a snapshot of the language that was proposed in March. Very much a summary snapshot. And in the third column is a summary snapshot of the things that this group has discussed. Okay? Front side is the Public Good Order, Public Behavior Ordinance. The back side is the Transportation Ordinance. Both of those were ordinance proposed changes in March. Okay? Does that orient you to that? There's a lot of repeats between this document and the document that I started with, which where there was general agreement on kind of language. Lots of, you'll see lots of consistency between them. The last document is the ordinance as it is currently redrafted based on the feedback from this group. So last meeting you saw a slightly different version. It looks a little bit different now. There's been some small changes based on comments last meeting about inflatables, and some small changes related to the order of the signs of intoxication. That was a conversation that we had at the last meeting, that they didn't feel like they were in the order from the most serious to the least serious, or that they were grouped together. It just, people felt like it didn't quite match what was needed. So that was reordered. Okay? So I'm going to just pause a little bit. You've got some time to reflect on the documents you have. We're going to talk about those, and you have time to vote. When I see that everybody appears to have looked at their materials and have voted, then we'll start through with what we're going to talk about today. Is that fair? You vote for 3. This time you have your choice about how you vote. If you want to vote, put all 3 of your dots on one. If you want to put your dots on all 3, on whatever, you've got the power to vote how you would like for the ones that are up there. This doesn't mean that these are the only things that are going to be worked on, but it is a sense of all of these might be priorities, and all of them will be discussed in different places around the community. We're hoping that you guys bring them to other groups and other individuals, but we want to get a sense of what we want to signal to the community as this group thinks is most important next. Okay? Any other questions about process? Yeah, Joe.
Can you clarify what number 3?
What that means? Yeah. Yep. So number 3, when it was proposed a couple of meetings ago, was literally that. Remember, this was a brainstorming session, but it was assure city policy that has adequate lighting, better lighting citywide as a strategy to really look at health and safety and potential impacts. There actually has been some work done on that in some specific neighborhoods, but yeah.
So just the statement doesn't really make sense the way it's written. Assure there is a city policy that has adequate lighting? Is that, or assure that the city has adequate lighting?
Mm-hmm. So I believe that the intent, and I don't know if whoever was here that brainstormed that, it was really about the comp plan exists. Do we have sufficient language in the comp plan to say lighting is a priority and that is at a sufficient level to assure health and safety?
Okay.
Does that helpful?
Yeah.
So that there's intention in this community that we have safe lighting and that it's done. So it might be both policy and practice, but minimally that the policy exists. And I frankly I don't know if it exists. We probably have a planning person that can tell us, but I know that there's work done on lighting in neighborhoods. Any other questions about process?
I have one on 5. We're saying related
Sure.
to property owners.
Yeah.
Is that going to be all property owners? Is that to landlords?
Yeah, I think this is explore policy or ordinance related to property owners. What was stated at the time, so I'm repeating, what brainstormed at the time was, and I'll just read the bullets under this document, hold landlords accountable, need to address lack of care for properties from landlords, nicer apartment may not be as likely to throw party and trash it. I'm reading this verbatim.
We're basically talking about land.
Fines for landlords after so many nuisance calls. I believe that is the intent. All of the bullet points underneath it that people described, rentals. Correct. Yep. And I think when we talked about this was at our, I think, first or second meeting, there was also an attempt to get a landlord to the table here. We have not been successful with that, although they're on our email list. But yes, that is my understanding from that original conversation. I think that was like in April, maybe. Yeah, April, May. So again, these were very much brainstormed ideas. This was, none of these have to stick on the wall if we don't want them to as being recommendations from our task force. It is also not the intent that this task force needs to say that we want a specific city ordinance that whatever, does something to landlords. It's more about we think that this should be explored to look at that issue. Does that make sense? And we obviously haven't done any of that work. But good question. Yeah, Pat.
Mind reading the 12 statements for us?
I can read the 12 statements, and they're all on here too. So people with lots of details. So the 12 that were bubbled up from our last meeting when we did some initial voting, or 2 meetings ago, Public Good Order Intoxication Ordinance was one of the brainstormed ideas. That one we are working on. So we can you don't have to vote on that one. I had originally put that across with just this is what we're working on. So I can take that one off. Whoop. But I wanted to acknowledge that we're working on it. I think last time I didn't put it up and everybody's like, where's number 1? So that's number 1. Policy ordinance related to alcohol serving establishments. And you guys remember these were grouped into policy, education, and community change. I have that list in the PowerPoint. We'll pull it up. Number 3, assure city policy that has adequate lighting. We just talked about that. 4, consider alternate consequence for ordinance violation. That actually is already under discussion, and we may want to eliminate that if people agree that the current ordinance is intending to accompany that, but we can talk about that. 5, ordinance policy related to property owners. We just discussed this with Dave's question. Policy ordinance related to alcohol access, and the bullets under that, just to frame that, are related to reduction of alcohol outlets. And there's a lengthier one about limit number of places where alcohol can be purchased. So those are kind of how are there places for people to buy alcohol, and do we want more policy around that? Policy ordinance related to safe rides, and you may remember at our last meeting, this was verbally prioritized as the top thing that this group wanted to put forward. We didn't vote on it then, but people said we really need to work on this. Community event or practice culture change. This is related to, does every community event need to have alcohol? I think, Jed, maybe you or someone else mentioned that at our very early meeting, that it seems like every event has that. Good or bad, that's not the issue, but is that what we want? Alcohol serving organization practices or procedures, so things like safe, sober server policies or those kinds of practices are here. Transportation practice changes, so these are very much related. This is a practice change, this is a policy change, again, could be combined. Educational efforts aimed at CVTC students and UW-Eau Claire students, again, this is under the educational grouping. And then education for the general community. So these were all just on-the-wall brainstormed ideas, and now we're at the point where we committed to council to come back and say, what are the general recommendations that we think this community should pay attention to in order to change the overall culture related to alcohol and other substance misuse? Joe, I think, was next, and then Helene after that.
Well, I may have answered my own question. I was going to ask how 2 and 9 are different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I started to group them, and we may want to talk this through if there's general consensus about that, this was really about internal practices, the practices and procedures. So I, at an individual place, I'm encouraged to have procedure that does ID checking in a very certain way. I'm making this up as I talk. Yeah. This is a policy that says I have to, if I can only allow people that serve in my establishment be there if they are sober. And it's a city policy change versus internally I tell my people, you can't drink when you work here. Right. We could put that together, that's a shared strategy, but they are different methods to get to maybe a similar culture change with alcohol establishments. Is that fair?
Would you like suggestions on that? Or would you like
Absolutely. Yeah.
I suggest you combine those two as well as 7 and 10 because these seem to really be intertwined.
Mm-hmm. Is anybody opposed to combining? So the question was, can 2 and 9 be combined? These two are related to alcohol serving places, and can this and this be combined? Any opposition to that? So you're voting on fewer number of, this one would be related to alcohol serving organizations. We'd put that together, and this would be related to transportation practices and policies. Anybody opposed to having fewer choices? Yes, Helene.
No,
Okay. Anybody, before we move, are you opposed to that? Are you opposed to it, or is it a different issue? Pat?
Well, there's one more, number 4.
Oh, okay.
Are you going to get rid of that? You hinted that maybe we don't need that one. I don't want to waste my votes, so if I
Okay.
do that, and then something
So that's an additional question. Do people feel comfortable that our conversations about the current ordinance are people confident enough that the work that's been done by the city and by the university and the county to make sure that there are alternatives to being cited for this ordinance? It's not done yet, but there's a commitment to that. Are people comfortable with taking this off the list because there's been a commitment? And then you don't have to waste your votes. What? Absolutely. Yeah, and it is in some of the spots. I know it was added somewhere in those documents. Comfortable with that? Okay. So that's another proposal. Anybody else have additional changes to this grouping before we vote on that?
number?
Yeah, Pat, I think was next. And then we'll get to you, Nick.
Between 2 and 9, is 2 with being the city or county policies, that's one thing, but number 9 relates to like discouraging alcohol establishments from having happy hours or drinking competitions.
Those feel different enough? The input points are different enough. So this is a proposal to keep these separate because policy around density, policy around sober server might be different than really doing some hard work to say, do you need to have, they could be connected. I mean, they definitely could be. So maybe one of the things that if this goes somewhere related to alcohol establishments is, do we want to push hard in one place or the other, or do we have different strategies with this target? So I'm seeing some, anybody have strong preference about keeping that apart or separate? I understand, Pat, why we might want to do it. It's pushing in different places. The target is, target being a bad word, but alcohol establishments. Together or apart? Help me.
I would say apart because it's the same game but different bases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're keeping it apart. Good. All right, so thank you to Health Department staff who rescued me here, since I can't work without a PowerPoint. First of all, welcome back. Thank you guys for coming. Those of you that were here earlier, my apologies that I got you documents so late. That was my fault, and it has just been a really tough June and early July, and I did not get a chance to really get them pulled together. So my apologies that you did not get time to review them. So I'm acknowledging that up front. This is a reminder, as we have every meeting, that this is the charge for our task force. Cooperative dialogue, research, development of recommendations that promote ownership related to the changes to improve the public good. So just that reminder. When I talk about this group to others, I say, I am just so amazed that such a diverse group of people keeps coming to the table. So I want to express my appreciation to you guys again about that. Last time, those of you that were able to be here, we talked about the draft on the table at that time. That's where some of these additional changes that I just talked through came from. And we talked about stakeholders and process for next steps. So that's where the document also that came from. Who do we need to talk to? Who might be the spokespeople? What might be the messages came from? So it was a draft of that. Today we're going to do some of those similar things. We're going to talk about how the proposed ordinance would move forward and what the community discussions might be, and we're going to talk about what we just went through. So we've done some of this work already. If we could go around the room and again describe progress to date. So I changed my word. This is the same question. Last time I can't remember what I said, but I know I typed a different word in today. So again, to model that, because we're not going to spend a lot of time saying a lot more about progress to date, but we will have opportunity for that. So I'm Lisa Giese, I'm the facilitator, and my one word about progress is evolving. There's been a lot of moving parts in this, and it's evolving. So we will start here.
I'm Jennifer Harder. I'm from Oak Creek County CCS. I'm a substance use professional, and interesting.
Progress to date, interesting. Thanks, Pat.
Pat Ivory from the City Planning Department. Encouraging.
Thanks.
Katie Wilson, I'm with the Healthy Communities High Risk Drinking Prevention Action Team and also a health educator at the university. And I'm going to say intriguing.
I'm Haley Mueller with the City Attorney's Office. This is my first meeting.
Thanks for being here. Go ahead.
I'm Janessa Stromberger, also from the City Attorney's Office, and my word is inclusive.
Okay, everybody has to talk louder. I hear blowers, so inclusive. Helene.
Helene Smyer from Historic Granite Park Neighborhood Revitalization Corporation. My word is contemplating.
Contemplating. Yeah.
Kevin Rosenberg, 3rd Ward Neighborhood Association.
No word. That's fair.
Chad Hoyer, Eau Claire Police Department. Closer.
Closer. Brandon.
Brandon Yates, Student Body President, Complex.
Complex, yeah.
Maddie Forrest, Student Body Vice President of Eau Claire, Eau Claire. Interesting.
Nick Ashman, Historic Randall Park Neighborhood Association. My word is puzzle.
Puzzled. Yeah.
Joanne Poldina, students, UW Eau Claire. Warmer.
Warmer?
As in warmer, getting warmer.
Getting warmer. All right, that's good. Like when you're trying to get somewhere where you don't quite know where you're going. Yeah, Margot.
Margot Keys, Chippewa Valley Technical College. My word is iterative.
Iterative.
Alan Virgin, the Eau Claire Fire Department, and I would say momentum.
Momentum.
Courtney Drexler with the Health Department, collaborative.
Jed Hart with the Pioneer Pickle, Pro.
Yeah.
Dave Olson, Eau Claire Tavern League, promising.
Thanks.
Steve Nick, City Attorney, important.
Good. Thanks for that, you guys. I know it's a little thing. I think it reminds each other of each other's names and where you come from, because that's always a challenge for me of names. But also, we got to keep thinking about what is it we're doing and why. So I appreciate that time going around the room. All right, so we are now, again, this is just my very simplistic reminder that we talked a lot about problem at the first meeting, and you guys did a really nice job laying out substance use, alcohol, how it impacts our community, and that there's lots of solutions, okay? And these are some of them on the wall. We've spent a lot more time now on one of the solutions, but it is only one of many. And this is this is that list, and it's grouped with things highlighted that scored 6 or higher. So you'll see some of the numbers are missing. I just took them off the list to not vote on. We've now grouped a few things, so we don't have to go through that again. So what I'd like you to do now, did everybody get enough time while we were waiting initially to look at the documents, or do you want some quiet time now to keep looking at those at the same time that you vote? What are people's preference? Because I really want to honor that some people might not need to reflect. Does anybody need additional time? And this is safe. You can say yes, and we'll all respect you. Are you good? All right. Then right now, I'd like to take the next 5 or so minutes to vote. And if you could put 3 sticky notes, however you want to, on what you see up there. Okay? So we're going to do that first before we jump into the next discussion. And I'm going to find my water bottle so I don't lose my voice. Outlook to my whatever that weird Outlook version is where that I had sent it, so I don't, something's weird, you know, like a timing. Sorry about that. I was like at that.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, and of course I hadn't printed it.
You know.
Did you go back, or did you just stop and park then?
Well, we started to go back. We ended up. I misread the email, so we ended up over at RC.
Okay. Okay. We next are going to go to the ordinance, just so you know. But I wanted to get this done so someone could count the votes and we could come back to that afterwards. What's that? Right, that's what we're going to do next. That's why I was giving you a heads up that we didn't skip past it. Yeah, that's fine. We're going to talk about all of it. We can, it's just, yes. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you've got copies. Do you have copies for everybody? Okay. Okay.
Did we split up 10 and 2?
Nope. Some of them are gone because they weren't voted on last time. So 2 is still there. 10 was not voted on previously, so it's been eliminated. Yep, 7 and, is it 10? Oh, you're right, 10 is underneath there. Has everybody had a chance to vote? Anybody still contemplating and not up there yet? All right. Oh, one more.
I'm trainable.
It's okay. We're good. We're still fine. All right, thanks, Jed. Of course, when you go last, everybody's watching where you put them, so that's always interesting, too. All right, are we ready to regroup? We good? We'll have some conversation at tables in just a little bit, but are we all ready? Yeah? Just that reminder that, again, the problem that you guys identified included language around neighborhood disruption and disorder, death, injury, risky behavior, and culture. And we will tally the votes and discuss the how in just a minute. So I'm flipping back to the ordinance now, okay? So reorient. We're going to leave this be while Marissa in the back helps visually tally so we can put them in order. But what I want to do is reframe back to the ordinance, okay? We ready for that? So we're back to the 4 documents. And what I'd like to do is for each of us to just spend, and we were going to orient to the documents. We've already done that. We've done our reflection time. What I'd like to do as a group is to do just some general Q&A about the documents and materials. And I know that there's at least one person that has some specific questions. Let me just make sure and we'll get to the key messages. But we have an ordinance that you have in front of you. We've had lots of discussions about it. We have content related to generally what we've agreed on. We've got content related to where there's still differing opinions by some people. And we've got to get to a point where we take the next step, because we talked at our last meeting that over the summer there's intent related to this ordinance to start walking the road of communicating and start walking the road of bringing something back to council. Okay? So we are at that point, and we can get stuck on this point for a long time. We can go down lots of rabbit holes, but my job as facilitator is say, we need to be done with one conversation, allow lots of community input over the summer and at council, but we need to be comfortable that we are at a place that feels right to people, even if we don't all 100% agree. I know there's been some reflection since our last meeting by some of you, and I'd like to give some space for that. So, for example, there was both Chad and myself were by accident at the Third Ward Neighborhood Association meeting, not by accident, but we were there to help support a conversation about the process. And so there was good dialogue there and some back and forth already. But many of you may have, between June and now, had some additional conversations. So I want to open the floor for an amount of time that's going to be reasonable so we don't frustrate each other with rehashing everything again, but to have that conversation. So I know I'm going to start with Helene because she signaled to me right away that she had a question and concern that she wanted to share, and so she is now talking for a short amount of time.
Okay, I'm thankful that you will listen to me, and I'm grateful that the lawyers are here because I was reading over some city ordinances. I was one of those a bit unsettled. I've always been a bit unsettled about how we are talking about the blue bus in particular. So I was looking at the city ordinances, and check me if I'm right or wrong. I have copies that I'll pass on to you when I'm finished. But bear with me, this all hangs together with the revitalization of the neighborhood and with city plans. So in section 10, there's a section titled Vehicles and Traffic, subsection 1040, miscellaneous regulations, and then there's a further subsection, number 1040-170, titled Exhibition Driving. I clicked on it because I wanted to see what it was. Mostly about noises from revving engines, cars peeling out, kicking up gravel, but it concludes with this statement, which I thought was relevant, and we may have missed it. Nor shall any driver operate a motor vehicle within the city limits of the city in a manner that would disturb the public peace. Diesel engines, such as the blue bus, disturb the public peace in our neighborhood while idling, sometimes for 20 minutes, with large groups of noisy passengers getting on and off in the hours meant for sleeping. So back to the law, our proposed section, it appears to me, number 72020, ignores this existing law and creates a law that sanctions late night buses in all neighborhoods now and expands a culture of party buses. Now, bear with me, please. Connecting this to the revitalization of the historic Randall Park neighborhood. The area west of 5th Avenue, where the majority of complaints come from the disturbance calls by the blue bus, is the initial targeted area for revitalization. I just came from visiting a house that may be our first house to turn over into an owner-occupied house. It's exciting stuff. But the rationale for that area is more students are beginning to move to newer dorm-style housing, and landlords who cater to students are slowly becoming aware of the idea that they could sell to our not-for-profit corporation for a tax break, because student rentals will not be as high in our neighborhood. That's the goal. The board of directors of the corporation plans to identify, purchase, renovate when possible, and resell homes in this area with an emphasis on affordability for owner occupation. And you certainly must know about the need for affordable housing. This goal is to stabilize the historic neighborhood. It also benefits student rentals that remain in the area, and we want student rentals to remain. They will always remain. We are a university neighborhood, and we want to be the best university neighborhood in the state. And we want to establish higher standard of care for homes, safer housing for everybody, and healthier housing. So disturbance of the peace negatively impacts the success of what we're trying to do on revitalization. It's pretty hard to market an area when all we hear is negative about alcohol and blue bus behaviors. So you'll need to be reminded that this is not only the goal, this revitalization is the goal of a 2014 neighborhood plan, 2015 city comprehensive plan, 2016 revitalization task force outcomes. It makes, in my mind, and you feel free to correct me, no logical sense for our group to propose a new altered city ordinance that's in opposition to the existing city plans. I would not want to go before the city council to approve those plans and say, we now think that we ought to have this bus traveling through the neighborhood, disturbing neighborhoods, and carrying underage. So I propose, because Lisa says, don't come up with questions unless you have solutions. I propose that the proposed new ordinance we have, 972020, be eliminated, the existing law or ordinance in section 104170 be strictly enforced, consultation or clarification by city lawyers may be required. I propose a subcommittee to establish or be established to rework section 2, perhaps entitled Addressing Safe Rides Home, including Uber, taxis, some of the new things that are out there. That's been a consistent goal, as pointed out in this group. It should be agreed upon by this group that the city need not take responsibility for transporting residents to a party, just home. We should have a safety net, because we know we all make mistakes in our choices about drinking. Students will make mistakes. We expect them to. They're young. They should make mistakes. So we should have a safety net for them, and that's what that second part of our ordinance should focus on. We should address the need to focus on helping those who make mistakes, not compounding the problem with what I view as a new cultural phenomenon that's happening. And since just it only seems to be a problem in our neighborhood, I am not sure that I've ever successfully gotten across how serious it is. But since we opened the door to all neighborhoods, I thought you should understand this could be serious everywhere. Now, one last thing, it eliminates the contradiction between our concern and agonizing over public excessive intoxication and the simultaneously sanctioning of a busload of drop-offs to neighborhood parties, many of whom, it's been acknowledged, are underage drinkers. I rest my case. I have copies. I appreciate your attention, but I almost truly beg you to please consider this, because it's imperative. We are the oldest neighborhood. We're not the only oldest neighborhood.
Sure.
And yours will be getting older. So if you put yourself in the frame of mind, what about 20 years from now when our house is deteriorated, how do we want to treat this? I think we're setting a standard here, as I think Pat can attest to when we talk about revitalization, it isn't just about our neighborhood, it's the first model of how do you go about addressing important things. Plus, I really think that contradiction between
So Helene, can we talk about that? So I want to hold, because I think there are other people that want to comment. So to facilitate the conversation, I think I understood, and I will summarize because I haven't seen the document yet, that there's concern about the existing language. So those of you that have the ordinance in front of you, it's 9.79. The problem that was being solved, I'm going to summarize, this is LISCA language, not anybody else language, for 9.79 was concern expressed in neighborhoods about large groups of people being dropped off without the owner or the person living in that property's consent. So it's very explicitly 10 or more people. It's what's prohibited is 10 or more people being dropped off without the owner's consent. That is the first A. B is what's prohibited is consumption in a motor vehicle like that by anybody. So turning it into a bus where there was drinking. And then C, that it doesn't apply to transit. So that's what is in here, just to orient us back to that. So I think one of the questions that may come up to you, Helene, is the framing of this as being promoting drunk buses, I think is, because I think explicitly we've talked in this group about this being framed to decrease the impact of unwanted people at parties, large groups of unwanted people dropped at parties. And it prohibits drinking on a bus. So the ordinance that is in existence is related, I'm hearing that is related to disturbance from a motor vehicle could definitely apply to the running of an engine for long periods of time and could be enforced for that issue, but certainly couldn't likely be enforced for drinking on or dropping off, likely, but it's possible. Am I reflecting correctly? And I think there may be questions about what is the concern about this language.
Not quite.
Okay, good.
I think you're missing what the purpose of the bus was intended for safe rides is not happening. It is not, we have no obligation to get students to, or anyone, to a party. And the hours in here, the numbers, and this doesn't require any of that still. I think that's part of why everybody at the last meeting said we need to talk more about transportation, because we need clear strategies related to making sure that people that need rides home have them. I think I'm reflecting broad group sentiment that was, and I see there's lots of points there. So I'm just suggesting you throw it out and we spend some time really contemplating this. It's complex. It's a complex issue, and I don't know that anybody really understands.
Yeah. And that's this proposal, that we need to spend time on it. I think the question maybe on the table is there concern by this group about the language related to dropping off a large group of people at a house, or concern about drinking on the vehicle? I think that might be the question for the current language. And I think Helene, and tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, one of the things Helene's describing is there needs to be a lot more conversation about this because of neighborhood revitalization.
And I think it needs to happen before we approve this, or before we put it forward, or present it.
Before
this does not answer the problem of it doesn't even address it. You may think it does,
okay,
but you're focused on getting those kids to parties.
That's not the focus in this ordinance, I don't think. Is that how people are reading it?
Yeah. You start at 9 p.m. They don't leave parties at 9 p.m.
I think I can't speak to that. I think our conversation has been the problem is big groups of people being dropped off where they're not wanted. And this was the language to try and solve that. It's not about getting people to parties. It's just about we don't want people that are being dropped. If we have a bus dropping off in any neighborhood, a big group of people dumped in any place that isn't wanted there creates problems. Am I reflecting accurately or no? No? And I think that question has come from the neighborhoods, that is a concern.
That question actually our neighbors for years have been struggling with this, with the fact that this bus is just allowed to ride around in the neighborhood. And I have heard complaints for many years. Just for your information, I heard from a neighbor who said that since the beginning of March, when the bus shut down, the difference in improvement in a family's quality of life has been remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
This has been the most well-behaved and quiet spring and summer in our 12 years in Eau Claire. And that's what is not being addressed. The students' issues are being addressed. Addressing yours, I don't understand, help me with it.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we worried about getting people to parties?
Okay. Yep. And yep. I think Joe had his hand up first, and then yep. No, I think we should all talk. That's the group conversation.
I think that businesses have a legal right to operate on our streets. Buses, shuttle buses, Ubers, they have a legal right to operate on our streets. So we're not facilitating that. What's in the ordinance is, in fact, to limit that. It's an attempt to limit the problems associated with that. So I completely agree with you in terms of the concerns that you have about the blue bus. I completely share those, and I know that they're a really big problem for the neighborhood. So I agree with that. So we're not giving anybody permission. We are limiting the circumstances under which a business who wishes to do that on our streets can do that. That's one point. The other point is, if I owned a business and I got a ticket because I had a diesel bus in your neighborhood, I could defend that in a New York minute. Because there are diesel engines going through there that are I mean, any attorney could get that one thrown out, I think. So I don't think that what you're proposing as the solution is really very workable. I completely agree with you about the blue bus. Whether or not this does it or does enough, could be talked about. But it's limiting it. It's not empowering it or giving it permission, because businesses have the right to operate. And this is limiting the way in which they can operate.
Could we perhaps limit the hours a bit more? What's the purpose of the 9 p.m.? I understand what you're saying.
I think there's
viable business maybe if they don't have the drop off. My question is to Brendan, with Uber and Lyft and those types of things, how important is the bus anymore? Is it fading in importance?
Yeah, I would say that it is fading in importance, and also I think you're seeing a decline in house parties, and that's when a lot of people use this shuttle service, which to go from party to party. So it's not really a practical business plan anymore, so more students are using Uber and Lyft. But I mean, as we talk about the cons of this bus, I think there are a lot of positives that we should focus on, and the lives that it did save, and that's tough stuff to think about, but that happened. It does happen, and so I think, there are cons to the bus, but we need to talk about the positives as well.
Here. I mean, that's this conversation. So as a facilitator, and I'm just going to say this, we started with an ordinance that was, a draft that was 9.79 that had the original conversation. This is a redraft of that original. I'd like, and other people can jump in, but one of the questions on the table is if people are opposed to this language moving forward, that's one question. If they are opposed to this being the only thing that moves forward related to transportation, I think that's a different issue. I think there's actually already been a commitment with Red Dots that it's not going to be the only thing moving forward related to transportation, to reassure that issue. I think that's, I can't count quickly enough, but it seems clear to me that this might be our top one. Is that is? Okay. So I just want to frame it that never was this ordinance supposed to solve all the problems related to any of these topics. But I think the question on the table, because council will get the old ordinance, or not the old, the proposed ordinance on March 17th, if I have that date right, 2018, and they will be asked to consider something. So if we don't give them new language from this group, and instead, I think Colleen's proposing deleting all of this. This is language that was created for March, and we have tweaked it, just to walk through process-wise. I believe I heard Helene say that there's a proposal on the table to delete this. That would be the option to council at the moment. I think what this group has said up to this point, up till today, is we like this language, but it's not sufficient. Is that a fair reflection? Al, did you have something to say? Oh, and I'm sorry, and Kevin. Was Kevin first? I apologize. Kevin.
I just had a question on B, on the motor bus or vehicle for hire and operation for use by the public shall not at any time allow the consumption of alcohol in the vehicle unless transporting exclusively for charter. I'm assuming there's some legal difference between a bus driver with a license to chauffeur and a wedding party hiring a limo.
I don't know the answer to the question. Can you answer that? I don't. Do you want to answer it, Janessa, about that phrase?
Yeah. So you know, your hypothetical wedding party, that's exclusively for charter. That's, you know, just the wedding party is going to be in there. They've hired that limo. So there is a chauffeur license that allows passengers then to consume or have an open container of alcohol, and that still allows for that with this language. But if in the blue bus scenario where anybody can get on or off, is not limited to certain people, that would prohibit alcohol and that sort of transport.
So that's the language that's in there. So again, in a situation, we talk about the blue bus, but again, it could be anybody that chooses to start a business that transports people. This would apply to. All of those provisions would apply to. Al is next, and then Helene after that.
All I was going to say about it, and just reading this and the discussions that we've had, I think what we currently have serves the purpose of its intent. But if we dive deep further into more transportation opportunities, looking for more solutions, I think it's, for one, going to make things a lot safer beyond this and way safer than they've been. It'll probably also solve a lot of the issues that you're describing.
I hope so.
I think there is a strong commitment to that.
I'm
Yeah,
wondering about the licensing then. These drivers of the blue bus have a chauffeur's license. Alcohol's allowed on there with the chauffeur's license. That's what I've been told. And they have been drinking on there. My question is, how do you enforce that?
So
drinking on the bus, number one. Number two, I thank you for helping me because maybe we don't have to scratch the whole thing.
I don't think we
maybe
have to. I think we
just
can just dive deeper to solve the other issues. Mm-hmm. This is that.
Would that something be added onto this? How does that work? Could we change the hours so that it's not so apparent? We're getting people to parties and just, we have them there for the hours.
I think that's going to be a whole new strategy to deal with that topic.
Yeah.
But if this is so open to hours and you don't change the license.
Hours could be eliminated, I believe, although we would have to, I'm saying off the top of my head, but the intent, I think, of A was that large groups of people not get dropped off if the owner doesn't consent. But I'm saying that out loud, I'm making that up. Yes, Brandon?
I guess I don't understand why we're continuing to have section 2 in here. I mean, it was targeted at the blue bus neighborhood, the blue bus in the Randall Park neighborhood. The bus isn't working anymore. It's not in service. I don't think it will ever come back into service. So we're regulating something that's not even a company or an organization anymore. And then if we go at this more comprehensively, then we can figure out a way to have safe rides, figure out a pick-up and drop-off space for Uber and Lyft on Upper Campus maybe. I don't know, but I just don't think we necessarily need section 2 anymore. It's not regulating any businesses that are running right now.
Sure. So again, I think that was part of Kevin's comment, but yes.
I think, the blue bus isn't operating right now, but that's not to say that there's not going to be a green bus. And there's not going to be a red bus after that, all right? And there's the other opportunities for transportation to come in and do these things like Uber and everyone else is endless. I mean, you're going to get a ride, hopefully. Now, the thing is, with the blue bus going away, my one concern is when the students come back, look at what you did. You took our blue bus away. I think there's the reason why I'm concerned about
that conversation
is to get, now that if we have taken the blue bus away, what are we going to do for these kids to get their safe ride home? Are you just going to hand them a little flyer at the door and say, here's Uber, call Uber,
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
So there's more conversation here. And part of it is the message, because if we say this ordinance took the blue bus away, I think this group has to be very cautious about that message. But I think the point, Brandon, that we talked about a bit at the last meeting, but help me if that feels different than what we talked about, was we may not currently have a blue bus, but like much of our policy, often what we do is to prevent problems in the future. So I think this group fundamentally has to decide, do we ever want large groups of people dropped off at places without their permission? And do we ever want drinking on a public bus is the question.
I was going to put that final point on it, but
thank you. Okay, sorry. I'm not supposed to talk, I'm supposed to facilitate, so it's a good reminder.
One add-on.
And then Nick,
when we're back to talking about drinking on the bus. All right, so we've put into the ordinance, right, that a bus that is not for hire, just going around, you cannot do that. Don't we cover ourselves right there? Just because anybody that's driving a bus has a chauffeur's license, correct? Or should have one?
Unless it's your bus.
Huh?
Unless it's your own bus.
Steve, help me.
So help us understand the question. What's the question, that you think it's not needed, or it is?
If we're putting in here that unless you're for charter, you can't drink on the bus, I would say you can't drink on the bus.
How do you enforce that?
Well, that's someone to have to turn it in, or I don't know. I don't have that answer.
Right.
But I guess getting back to it, then why are we putting it in there if we can't enforce it, or?
Right. I think it's enforceable with complaint, and it's enforceable. I mean, I think that's part of the challenge of any ordinance, very frankly. But again, for this group to think about, does this as a principle make sense in ordinance, is the question on the table. And I think we're at 3:30, so I want to be careful about going too far, but I'm checking with Helene as well. Today, there needs to be confidence in this group that our principle around this ordinance change, as well as the additional ordinance changes, matches what our conversation is. Not that we think this is the end-all be-all, and frankly, not that we think any of it is perfect. No ordinance is going to be perfect, I don't think, although I'm not an attorney, so yes.
I'm not a Packer fan, so I wouldn't get involved in it, but don't we have charter buses that would leave Eau Claire with people drinking on them to go to a Packer game or something? And
that's charter is how this, believe those are, again, it's not a public in and
you're
out.
all going and you're in a group that's
for a specific event.
Right, there's a difference between a charter bus and people getting on and off the bus. Is that right? Can an attorney comment on that?
Okay, so we can stop that discussion. There is a difference. The intent of this is that those situations where there's a charter, a guest list, as Katie just said, those things, that is not covered here. But if it isn't, if it's in and out, off and on, we don't know who these people's names are, we don't know who they are, but they paid their money, that's what we're talking about. Is that fair? Yes.
You're a Bears fan, right?
Ah!
Second of all, who gets the ticket if they're caught with an open container, the driver or the passenger?
Ah.
The bus driver or the passenger gets it?
This is related to the motor bus, am I saying that right?
It's the driver.
It's the driver, correct. If it's underage, that will be, I think there's all kinds of subtleties but that is my understanding.
They were to enforce that, does the driver get it?
Yeah, good question. So driver is how this is reading now. I'm looking. Additional concerns. Yes, Katie.
Thinking about, should this apply to all hours? We're not restricting safe rides home at all, so the hours are targeted to prevent the dropping off in the times that are most likely to happen currently. But would this be a useful ordinance in any situation at any time?
Yep. Do we need hours in there is the question. Anybody, I'm going to look at Janessa to help explain the hours, or Chad, is there a reason we specifically wanted certain hours? Or are the hours not matter?
I was originally addressing the issues that were coming up and addressing times that we were having problems.
Okay. And if there was no reference of hours, it would be at any time that these things happen, we are not okay as a community with them. Are people comfortable with that? Okay, so one additional change. Yeah.
Just to throw it out there, is
Yeah.
there anybody in here that thinks that a bus should drop 10 or more people off in the neighborhood at any time?
Uninvited.
Uninvited.
No
Yeah.
matter what?
He's saying invited too.
No matter what?
I live there. I hear them.
No, I'm just saying, somebody, is there anybody in here that thinks that 10 or more people should be, it's okay to drop 10 or more people off and somebody, and in the neighborhoods, not in the business districts, in the neighborhoods, at any time during the day?
I don't know, I wouldn't say you should restrict that, Chad. I mean, what if somebody's coming back from Big Falls or something, you know what I mean? You have to look at exactly what you're saying, and if there's 10 people on there, and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon even, I'm agreeing with the time, why is there even a time on it?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going someplace, you have the right to go someplace, or, you know what I'm saying, or they're coming back from upper campus and 10 guys play basketball. I mean, you can't say there's.
Coming back.
Coming back.
You're saying coming back.
Yeah.
To their residence.
Yeah, that's what he's saying, but they're getting dropped off.
Their own
there.
residence.
Yeah. Or they're invited to that person's house.
Yeah, I think Chad's opening up to potentially look at, do we even not have the invited piece in there? So that was what was on the table. So we have not had that conversation, and that was not part of the original problem. I think, again, facilitating, and I hate to do this, but do we want as a group to bring that to the table to look at an additional look? I'm hearing time off, but do we want to look at the invited versus uninvited issue? Is that a fair reflection of the question? Yeah. Yes, okay.
Sometimes we're trying to figure out if they're invited or not invited.
It's going to be challenging, you bet.
We're going to try to figure that out.
Yep. This is setting a little starting point of a standard that's a bit different than what we have now. We don't have this now, but that will be a challenge in operationalizing this, absolutely. It's easier to count people than to count people and determine if invite happened. Yeah, Joe, and then Katie.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it creates an enforcement issue with the invited versus uninvited. That would require somebody going to the houses in the neighborhood and saying, "Did you invite these people?" You know.
Mm-hmm. It does. It sets a standard for the operator to say, "I better not be if I have a question about whether they really know that this is a party that they should be going to, I'm going to say, not dropping you guys off." Possibly. It might produce some practice changes. It's a deterrent, perhaps. I'm making that up. But Katie, did you have something to add?
Well, I think it's okay as is in terms of uninvited. I wouldn't want to restrict people who are invited at least. I mean, I think that's an important. I think public transportation is important. This is a form of public transportation, and I think people should be able to freely.
Okay.
So, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, you would be back to the same situation where a student would call you and say, 10 kids have been dropped off, come help me.
Yes, in this situation.
If we take out those words, requested or consented.
No, that would be true now.
You're back to just complaint-based, that's how you deal with it. And it would be the responsibility of wherever those students were dropped, that if they weren't wanted.
No, it isn't taking us back there. If it was changed
It's illegal, period.
to drop off 10 would be illegal.
Whether they wanted to go there or not. So
Yeah.
I just threw it out
Oh,
there.
Okay.
so just say 10 more.
It's really impacting buses' ability to be in neighborhoods with big groups of people dropping off and on versus focusing on.
I'll scratch my.
Okay. You see I'm eating chocolate, you'll see.
It could be an improvement from an enforcement standpoint, you're saying.
It could be an improvement from an enforcement standpoint, so we have to think about that.
I think that's important because you can't expect to see.
The message will change in the public to one that I shouldn't eat chocolate and talk. To one that now the city is not allowing a large group of people to be dropped off anywhere for any reason, period, even if it's your own home. So I think we would have a discussion about messaging challenges to meet the need for enforcement. I'm just laying that out as something to consider if we want to walk that road. I'm seeing heads say, I think we're okay, but give me a barometer of whether we want to talk about this more. it might be a really important part of this discussion about how do we really think this is going to be implemented? If a new bus comes, the green bus or the orange bus, how do we talk about the current ordinance and good practices? Might be one of the next steps, but.
If a new bus comes along and they can do it better than the blue bus, I don't think we should restrict them. And I think there's a lot of cons to the blue bus, but we need to look at the pros to what it does. It transports students.
Yeah, yep. I think the question on the table though is, does this restrict in any way that we wouldn't want every other bus to be restricted? Do we want people to be dropped off at a residence that are not invited? Do we want drinking on a bus? Those are the two questions really on the table. Yes, Dave?
Oh, no, I think, one thing to look at too is, what if there's a blue bus and a green bus? What if there's two of them running around? I mean.
And they have different practices that related to these two issues. That's a question.
They're independent businesses.
If you restrict the requirements and the licensing, it's not going to be viable economically. That's why the blue bus left. He was not making money. It wasn't because of the ordinance. That's what I heard.
Oh,
Right, and I don't know that that's pertinent to this policy discussion. I think we need to talk about how do we make a viable alternative for transportation in this community, which is economic issues are involved. So Al, and then, yep.
Would it make everybody with concerns feel more confident in what we currently have right there if we say, when we clear this, we're making a commitment to that when we start down the road of strategy with it, looking for not just leaving it at this, but say, hey, we're making a commitment.
I think this task force has said that, yeah. This.
More options, to more and better solutions.
There's a specific effort that will move forward related to the bigger picture of transportation.
To me, that's where all of this is
I agree.
guided towards, that we need to look for more.
Yep.
And
we're gonna.
I for one, I will commit to that.
Okay, good.
And what I don't understand is, if you leave this, how does that relate to ordinance? Is that an addendum?
Not necessarily. There may be all kinds of things. Yeah.
Community members to say, okay, we've got this in place that allows for something, but we think we need to be better. We think there should be more. We think that
Put it this way.
we build on what's currently here to make Eau Claire fun and safe.
Yeah, and that we've committed to that. So.
And we're committed. Those of us that decide to
and I
move that way.
Brandon, the marketplace has corrected this. The blue bus is gone. We're older. The younger kids, they Uber it, they find their own ways.
Yep.
And I applaud them. And so why are we dragging in something that has been problematic?
So I think
I agree. I mean,
okay.
I think let's find other solutions, but until we do, I think we should take this out, because when students come back and they point at the ordinance and say, I don't have a blue bus because of the ordinance, if he's not running, it's not in the ordinance, you can say, not in the ordinance right now, and then find other solutions. We can and I don't even think it should be in this ordinance. It should be in like a transportation ordinance, not a public good order.
It's not in the public good order ordinance. Just to be clear, it's 9.79. The public behavior ordinance is a different number. I know it's confusing because of, and maybe that's a whole nother question about how we message this, but it is an entirely different ordinance. So I believe, so thank you for saying that, Brandon. I think the issue is if this is off, if what it goes to council is we are no longer proposing any language related to the dropping off of unwanted passengers in a neighborhood. It's off we're not bringing that back to. We are recommending that you not pass this, which is what would happen. It would be stricken and it would not come back. I believe I'm saying that correctly. That we would, it would be voted no, because that's what's on the table. This would be voted no. I don't believe it can come easily back or ever back. Am I saying that correct, Steve? I don't know. I'm not an attorney. No? Jump in.
No. I want to jump in, but I want to jump in on a broader observation.
Okay. So can you answer the question about could it come back? It was voted down when it comes forward. Yes or no?
Yeah. What would likely happen, whatever this committee recommends, we'll probably draft a substitute amendment. So what will happen is whatever we can kind of get some consensus on, we're going to say, here's an alternative. So here's what you last considered, you know, in spring. Here's what we now suggest. And if this section should be out, it'll just be out. And it can come back and be considered as a separate item.
Later. Okay. So I think...
If I can then. So my broader observation is that, one, we're tasked with dealing with the very challenging issue of excessive alcohol consumption in our community, to some extent related other drug use, and its negative effects on health and safety of that individual and secondary effects on the neighborhood. So when this ordinance was drafted, the issues related to transportation of large number of individuals to the Randall Park neighborhood. It never dealt with safe rides home, never ever did. It was always about transportation to that Randall Park neighborhood in large amounts was causing major disruption. So it was something, this provision was asked for by the Randall Park neighborhood and PD and talked about in our groups with the university as one of those really concerning secondary effects. If that's no longer the case, and frankly, if it just, you know, it's a good discussion, but if it, you know, we even, after what, our 6th meeting now, you know, talked this long about it, I guess my suggestion too would be, maybe it needs to be dropped and brought back at a later time, because I know from our office and what's critical to the city is that we squarely focus on a public policy statement that we can get behind and ultimately, hopefully, council can adopt that says excessive alcohol consumption is a problem in our community, we want to do something about it. That's number one. And two, that we want to do something about it by enacting a public intoxication provision that says, as we've refined it through the good work of this committee, excessive alcohol consumption through the type of indicators that we now have listed is simply unacceptable. And we're going to give our law enforcement tools to deal with it if individuals choose to make that sort of wrong behavior that's unsafe for them and for the community. And then if they do it, then we're going to use ways to divert and give them another chance and education and all that sort of thing. But that's at least what we're laser focused on. And this whole thing seems to be, if it's not an immediate necessity to that, and then it's an active distraction from that, I guess my suggestion would be that this group gets a consensus around the notion of removing it, and we deal with it later as part of a transportation ordinance.
So that is a possibility. It does then, again, as Dave articulated and others, we then have we don't have anything on the books if the next bus comes in order to say there are regulations, minimal regulations around operation. So.
Well, we do. I mean, pointed out that there is some regulations on the books for a bus.
Those will not be effective.
Yeah, they won't be effective, and not related to the drinking on it, nor the dropping off of multiple passengers at an unwanted place. I think
we'd have to deal with it through a separate ordinance at a later time. But we're, just like Al said, we'd be committed to doing that. If the issue comes back up, it becomes a problem again. It doesn't mean council couldn't take it up at another time.
So do we want to react down the road, or do we want to do something now that's preventive? There are pros and cons of both. There is a message in the student community around this that I think Brandon has articulated well. So I need temperature from the group, or we're going to be sitting here forever, because I think there are some people that have differing opinions about it. So help me understand.
I think one of the problems, I've talked with city council members, they don't want to pass this ordinance unless there are safe rides. My whole purpose in the beginning of this is you're emphasizing rides around and drop-offs equally as much as safe rides home. Sure. And there really are no statistics that say the bus saves lives. There's nothing documented that says that. We have had the one death in the river. I mean, it's not documented.
Sure.
It's anecdotal documentation, like I have anecdotal documentation of complaints of the noise.
Sure. I think the council's, I think council's comments have been around, I won't pass this unless there's safe rides home, was very much framed, as we all know, on the message that this was eliminating safe rides home. So just to be clear that I know council equally heard the messages that weren't always accurate about what was in the ordinance. Katie?
So I see Steve's point of strategically speaking, it might be wise to hold off with this. On the other hand, this process has taken a really long time. So if we are reactive in the future, it's going to take a long time.
We're going to have to start up again.
And move forward with change. What's that?
Yeah, Nick.
My thought is, honestly, and I agree with what was said earlier, take out the times, have this be a 24/7, and keep it as a placeholder for now. At least we have something, and I think this might be deterrent enough for the current issue, just to get it in place, because 6 meetings worth of arguing over the specifics on a small, tiny piece of this whole process, and then to say we're just going to drop it, and then have to come back and revisit this, and in the meantime, there's nothing in place. It's just we're gonna be back to square one.
So I'm seeing some of that frustration in the room, but also a strong sense that there may be issues. Yeah.
The current bus is not out of business. The current bus stopped because the weather got warm, and I think to make a statement. So I think coming back in the fall is very, very likely. That's one issue. The other issue is from a public health perspective, delivering people to places where there's excessive alcohol consumption creates as much danger as thinking about then giving them a safe ride home. So I think if there's other ways of looking at giving people a safe ride home, to me that makes sense.
And
From a
this
public health
commitment.
perspective, this sort of transportation service creates as much danger, in my opinion, more danger, real danger that we see weekend after weekend than the issue of whether or not if they have some other, they can't use their Uber.
Okay. Yeah, Jed.
I'm in the trenches Wednesday through Saturday down there, and I see a lot of buses. Great points. Excessive drinking. If we take the alcohol off the bus, from what I've heard from people that use the bus, it was a rolling bar. So they can't drink on the bus, and somehow that's enforced. I don't know how you do it. That's gonna diminish the bus's activities because they're not going to go on the bus because it's not a free bar anymore. And again, taking people to unsupervised house parties, I mean, that's not the best for anybody, but if we can do it a safe way, let's do it. The goal for Randall Park, is it no buses? Is that where we're at now? No buses in Randall Park?
Well,
That's what
lessening the disturbance all around.
And my question is this, because we all deal with masses of people. A bus or 30 people walking to a house. What's worse?
It's a bus.
Okay, because the second's gonna happen. If you drop them off at Wilkinson's new building and they walk 3 blocks, it's gonna be just as loud as a bus.
And we've lived with that.
Okay, just wanna get up
Human
there.
voices are not as disruptive as a bus that's idling out there. Yeah, we would take for walking. I've taken that poll.
Okay.
We'll go back to.
This is definitely not solving the bus ever being there. So yes.
Wasn't there talk in this room about Uber and Lyft drivers purchasing 15 passenger vans and creating probably?
Sure. Yeah.
So I mean, it may still exist.
We're not going to solve for everything with one ordinance. Katie, I think you were next, and then Kevin. You're good, Kevin.
Except the bus is the problem because it's so loud. You know, if it wasn't such an old, loud bus.
Which may or may not be something that the ordinance that Helene mentioned, we could explore that as part of this. So that's an existing ordinance that Helene mentioned at the start. I need temperature, you guys. We've now spent a lot of time on this. Do we want to do a hand vote of who wants to keep this moving forward, or at least proposing back to City Council that we do want to keep the revised, the updated, revised, whatever new language in, or that we want to say we think it should be entirely off? Do we want to do that? We haven't done voting here, but I'm hearing very different perspectives around the room. And I understand the rationale around each of them, so yes.
I think I'm willing to support Randall Park because they have the problem,
So the question is, with the commitment, this is the question on the table, with the commitment to work really hard on transportation and spending time with clear messages that, and not just messages, but action that transportation is worked on over the summer and into the fall, so that Brandon says, you know, we've got an active group working on this, and these are all the things that are going to move forward related to safe transportation, and we are restricting unsafe bus use. That is one option, I think, that we have on the table that this group has spent a lot of time getting to. Or we take off the ordinance and we focus on this and say we don't want the distraction of the ordinance language and we want the work done, but we won't have an ordinance on the books then if it passes for the blue bus and the coming back in the fall, the green bus, the orange bus, or any other bus. Those are the two choices, I think, right now, unless we want to spend I mean, I think a transportation group does need to dive into all of this content. Help me, do we want a voice vote, or Helene, what's your signal?
I agree with Nick. I think we've worked an awful long time. Something should be there.
Okay, so I'm hearing from Helene that, is there a disagreement that we shouldn't keep moving forward with what we have here, removing the time frames?
But with the understanding that this is not sufficient and those...
This is not sufficient, these need to be worked on, and we have a public, I don't know the right language, but we have an issue with students coming back in the fall and still saying, this is all about you getting rid of the blue bus for us. So I'm looking at you guys saying, I get that you guys have a problem if it's not off the books. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like the whole repeal and replace rhetoric. The students are going to have the perception that this ordinance or proposed ordinance took away the blue bus. And if there's nothing to replace it, that's going to be problematic.
And that's this commitment, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, there won't, and so I think you're hearing a commitment from this big table that we all hear that, and we're going to work on that, okay? And there's going to be some specific replace language, not in ordinance, but in our practice in this community, that the community has that commitment. Is that a fair statement? I mean, you guys all voted that we want this to be worked on next, so we've prioritized that. Okay, I'm going to take us off this topic because we've got lots more work to do. Can I do that? Is someone going to be really leaving the meeting upset with me that I'm taking us off, that we're not?
Well, we've got to draft something.
We have it. The draft is there. The draft exists. You guys asked for the time change to change. Helene brought forward as the start of this conversation a concern, and we have now circled back that we get that this is not perfect. It's not a singular solution, and we have a lot more work to do. Am I capturing that right?
Brandon, do you want it in or out?
I want it out.
Helene, do you want it in or out?
I started wanting it out, but I want something in. Can we just put a little thing that says we will deal with taxi cabs, Ubers, and safe rides home? Can we just
that's not an ordinance, and that's why, and it will be in the report up, down, and backwards. I'm hearing that. So
it says taxi cabs and motor buses.
That's the title of the ordinance section. Yes, Dave, did you want to jump in and say something?
I'm just trying to figure out where we're at.
Okay, I think where we're at, although I know Steve and Brandon have both proposed removal, I'm hearing generally from the group we want something in as clear. It's read.
I have not.
I know. I'm not.
In favor of removal. I
exactly.
want to clarify where people are, so we don't jeopardize something that we're really focused on. And so what we've been tasked on, and what I can say
is the intoxication piece.
Representing the city on of what we're trying to get to is core issues involved with excessive alcohol consumption.
Yeah, which we haven't talked about yet, which we need to.
So we spent this entire meeting on transportation, and a lot of the rhetoric defeating this in spring was related to transportation. A lot of it misinformation.
Yep.
And I don't want to lose the key issue of making progress on
because that rhetoric doesn't.
Because of that. We can come back and try to get it later, but I would hate to see that this really good ordinance and the good work of this group is wasted on a transportation piece that is important, but is not the totality of trying to get a grasp on excessive alcohol consumption.
And that's part of our bigger conversation. In a minute, you guys are going to be talking and thinking about how do we move this forward. And if all of the rest of you aren't supporting the students and saying there's a positive to this and change the rhetoric, it's going to it's gonna explode again. So I think it's Joe and then Al and then Jed.
I think that what's in the ordinance with respect to these buses makes sense, but I am concerned about a student backlash about it. That could both derail this with city council, and that could derail the implementation of the ordinance in general, and create a lot of real animosity between students and young people. It's not just our students, but young people in the neighborhoods and things like that. And I feel like that would take a lot to rebuild. So I'm starting to lean more in the direction of taking it out. Although I believe it's the right kinds of ways to limit the transportation. And if we can't get this straightened out in another year, then I would say,
it could come back later.
Y'all had your chance. We're coming. Now we're going to come back and put limits on it. That's my thought.
Thank you, Al.
Because we need to keep moving forward with this, my suggestion is we move to continue with it as it is, and immediately begin the process of looking for new and creative ways, so that when the students do come back, we have some solutions and answers for it. Those are the two options.
Not a, yeah,
If we
not.
have a solution by September when students come back.
Doesn't mean we'll have all the solutions, but.
Something more than we'll be working on it.
Yeah.
Okay, and Jed. Yep.
Private business, we can't just start another private.
Yep, Jed.
Number one goal, fun, safe, clean Eau Claire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, better alcohol, you know, excessive drinking. Is it easier to get that through front-side focus and take the transportation thing out?
Yep, I think that is the question on the table.
The goal is a safer, cleaner Eau Claire. Maybe we get rid of some of the fray and just focus on that.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little time out from this. I'm hearing conflicting thoughts about it. Are you guys comfortable as the facilitator if I spend some time after this meeting talking to the students who are the particular stakeholder? I want to acknowledge that everybody in this room is a stakeholder, and if we do nothing, then we are very frankly responding to one stakeholder group. And I, as a facilitator, I want to make sure we're hearing everybody's voices, and that is important. But I think we need to have an additional conversation. And if it appears that we can, as Al proposed, figure out a way to have a solution that Brandon just nodded, yep, that would make sense, that would stop the potential derailment of all of the rest of the work that you guys have done, that then we would, at the point of moving this forward, we have something, people are comfortable with this something, we're worried about that blue bus message derailing everything. So if the students and the process over the summer seem comfortable with keeping it in, we will keep it. We will propose from this group moving it forward. If it appears after some summer's work and conversation with students that there's still a big controversy, we may hold. Are people okay with that as a little bit mushier of a solution? Is anybody opposed to this content going forward at some point in time? The question is when. Is that correct? Okay, so can we work on the when offline from this task force? Is that safe? Does that meet people's needs? Okay, I'm going to move to the rest of the content. The focus of this is, help me out, safe, healthy, fun, community. We added language, the city proposed moving forward language related to public intoxication and neighborhood disruption in the rest of the materials that you have in the ordinance. And we have had long conversation around these tables about this. You see summarized in the other documents how things have bubbled forward. Not entire agreement about all the language, lots of change and understanding about what the initial language meant, lots of new understanding around this table, and some indication that maybe we need to work on explaining things much better. So that whole conversation we had last week about, oh, I didn't really understand that it meant this and that in order to be cited. Where are people at with this? And I think this is a last, again, kick at the can for how, because really our conversation today is supposed to be about how do we move this forward to all the stakeholder groups that you guys wanted this to go to. So I'm gonna, so content and this piece, key messages, key stakeholders, and what can you guys do as task force members? You all were part of the conversation. So Additional feedback on content, messages, stakeholders. And I'm gonna, okay, thank you, Steve.
I want to thank Dave in particular, Jed as well, but I think I had heard Dave really did a nice job of messaging at the Tavern League meeting. Maybe Jed was there too, but I particularly heard. But so I think that's something I just wanted to hold up and thank you for. You know, I've known you a lot of years, and I've always known that that you know you have some different perspectives sometimes. But I think all of us have it. You know, that's a tough environment to go into in terms of the Tavern League and say, no, we've worked on this, and this is an important issue, and we're getting close to getting it right. So I want to thank you for that, and also, Jed, these are tough issues for people that are in the business of selling alcohol to try to get around, and it's great that we're working there, and I think hopefully we get there with all the other important you know, interests and individuals that are in this room. But I think that's the way we kind of do it. Is we've all put in the work to understand this ordinance, and then doing things like that, to going back to the groups that we represent and explaining it accurately is of critical importance. So thank you all for the work you're putting in this. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, thanks.
All right, so, I mean, really, every one of you brings a different perspective. That's why we do work like this, right? Because we have to understand all those different perspectives, and we all do. So we've spent a lot of time thinking. We've provided lots of individual feedback, a lot of group feedback. Do you have any additional or concluding thoughts as we start talking about the next step of some of us? I'll talk about what the process was as a facilitator, the rest of you talking about content and how we got there. You know, all of us need to play a role in the next steps. Maybe small, maybe big. Maybe it's talking to your spouse about it. Maybe it's talking to your kids about it. But hopefully it's also talking to the Tavern League and talking to the colleague bars in the area and talking at CVTC to the administrators and talking to all of the students that you're connected with and talking at the neighborhood association meetings. I mean, that's why you guys are here. So more kicks at the can. You guys, I can't believe you've come to 6 meetings. Do you think you've said your piece? Do you feel comfortable with your piece? Yes, Brandon. And then Helene.
B4, we should get rid of the verbiage annoy, because we got rid of it in B2, just to stay consistent. Annoy and or insult.
Beef.
I guess overall, if part D was...
That was yeah, I see it. That was a deliberate change in language. It used to say something else, and I think you guys said, am I right about that?
It would be underlined if it was...
Oh, you're right, annoy. We changed it to harass. Okay, so annoy is a suggestion, yes?
Or insult, yeah. I guess if we passed a public intoxication ordinance, Part D, would Part B be solved through that mostly? I mean, how? No.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to limit to that public intoxication.
Mm-hmm.
Where
It's the both and, I think, in D.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a fair understanding? So is anybody opposed to the annoy suggestion? It's a tweak in language, and we may have additional small tweaks over the summer, but I think I will make a commitment as facilitator that you guys, will hold to the specifics here, but. Okay, annoy. Joe, did you have an additional, and then I'll go to Dave?
In the introduction, community disruption and unrest, I think the unrest, like we're suppressing unrest, to me it's a triggering word that could trigger opposition. So I would just...
We haven't talked about that previously. I think we moved the purpose statement forward. Are people comfortable with, and I don't know the legal difference between disruption and unrest, if there's a reason that we need both words?
If unrest is a term of art, I think that's fine, but my guess is it's not.
Is there any reason that anybody would be opposed to unrest being gone as kind of one of those trigger words that makes people like, is my unrest the same as your unrest? And like tamp me down. Control is part of that. Yep, I think there's some triggers there. Yes, Dave.
I had one that was sent back to me. The unreasonably disturbed, that was too vague.
Can you point us to where?
That would be right next to that 4, right before the annoy.
Okay.
I'll just bring it up, that was brought back to me, they felt it was too vague.
I'm sorry, I'm not, is it under D?
B.
Oh, B4, B4.
Unreasonably disturbed.
So that was added language. If you guys remember, we added that because disturb felt like was too, I don't know, I can't think, like too nice, too gentle, like what disturbs, like if someone whistles, that disturbs me, but unreasonably disturbed, well, someone whistling down the street is not going to be unreasonably. I think that's why we actually added that language. Yes, Chad?
So to kind of elaborate on that, sometimes we get noise complaints and what's unreasonable.
To one person.
And so at 7 o'clock at night, somebody's stereo, the volume of that compared to 1 in the morning, you've got to take those factors into consideration, so you have to see what's unreasonable.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's in there, because you could say you're disturbed, if you're working at night, you're disturbed with all the construction that's going on, but what's unreasonable?
So is that fair? Are you comfortable with that?
I'm trying to think there's another word that's, you know what I mean, that's not so blank as, because that's, I get what you're saying, but that's what some of this, well, who's going to tell me what's reasonable and not reasonable? You know what I mean?
That's the problem of all law. I mean,
Yeah, it
that's the tricky part of this.
It is a tricky part of this, and yes, Janessa, did you have a proposal?
The reason we use reasonable as a word is because a reasonable person standard is a legal term of art. So it has a defined meaning to the court system. So a judge looking at that knows what the reasonable person means. So just be, you know.
But reasonable is a word that's used in the court system.
Yes.
Yeah. Me not liking country music and wanting to have someone cited about that is probably not reasonable. I'd rather listen to rock. Sorry, did you have something, Jed? Did I notice something? No? All right, I'm definitely not a Bears fan, but I wouldn't make that a problem in a friendship. So, are they? They don't. They're not playing football right now, are they?
Sometimes they're tied for first too.
More. That's helpful. I think every time we look at this, we can tweak it. So I'm also going to say, stop. Yes, Celine.
I think the key message is
the
need for this ordinance.
Okay, can we move to that? Okay, so I want to talk about that, but are we? No, you're good. I just want to make sure people have said their piece because I don't want people to feel like they haven't jumped in about the content. We're going to talk about messages. Yep.
I mean, I can go on the record as representing students that, for the most part, C1 makes a lot of sense. C1 makes a lot of sense. And then D also is really what I am in support of, and I think would get us steps closer to the goal. Because I think B, a lot of students think that is targeted at them. Then also, I just see too, Maddie and I, when we were driving here, went up by Banbury Place and looked at those neighborhoods. And I just think a lot of people have like couches and stuff on their front porch, and it's kind of part of like their home aesthetic almost. And I don't know how you really enforce that.
Okay.
And so I just, going on record, that's what I support.
Okay.
And I would think most of the students would support that as well. But I know that we are just one stakeholder. But
Sure. No, I appreciate that.
When you say D, use all points under D.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that, Brandon.
I think, Brandon, number 2, that's a complaint-driven issue. So if I live next to you and you leave things out and I don't complain, chances are nothing will
Ever happen.
So
we all need to be nice to
explain it to this. I mean, it makes a difference in the appearance of the neighborhood. And as we get you involved in rehabbing these houses, you will have a stake in wanting things to be nicer.
Aren't we all hoping that this never gets cited under? I mean, really, if we really see an issue in Eau Claire and we want a fun, safe, healthy community, I hope that Chad says to me, in 10 years, he's still going to be here and we've never cited under this ordinance. Wouldn't that be awesome out of this group? That would, I mean, really, that could be, we could just say that. So, all right, I'm going to go off of content unless there's any last comments. All right, so we're talking about message. Ooh, what did I just do? Close. That means I have to be able to see that little thing now. All right, so your piece of paper that's on your desk that says at the top, ordinance changes, next steps in communication conversation. I want you to take just a minute on the back of it or wherever. There's key messages here. I want you to look at those key messages. I want you to think about what the most important ones are, or if you have additional ones. These are just ones that bubbled up from all of you. I want you to think about who you're connected with that are key stakeholders. So tell us who you think needs to be worked on and what you personally can do. So we're going to have quiet time you've got about 8 minutes to work on that, and then you're going to talk to us all about it. And I'm going to fill my water bottle. Thank you, Katie, for that earlier. Yep, it's the one that is, I'll say again, I know, I'm sorry they look so much. This is my total fault. Nothing like working at 11 o'clock at night. It's this one pager. It says, summary of work to date of, no. Not that one. Thank you, I had it up here. Yep, thank you. Did everybody hear Kevin? The bottom of it says spokespeople, Al, Beth, Jed, police, neighborhood members. So it's that one, if you look at the very bottom. Because you guys all said that Al needs to talk and Beth needed to talk. I was just reflecting what you said. This is not my work. This was your work at the last meeting. Spend some time looking at key messages that are not there, what you think they are. And Helene was just coming up with one, so write it down, Helene. Stakeholders that you're connected to, and what you're going to do. Those 3 questions. Guys need to be working. Come up with messages that you think will resonate with people. Come up with who you think that you are connected to. Marissa, help me with the numbers here. This one?
What number is it?
5, 6.
5 and 6 are 7, so those are the second and third highest.
Okay. Thank you. Two more minutes enough? Are people still thinking? No? Some of you are? Okay, keep working. Okay, key messages. Are you guys ready to talk? You're not yet? Not yet.
Somebody else. I'm lost.
Okay. So are we ready to talk about key messages? Okay. Go ahead, Al. I mean, I do want to make sure that the first thing we talk about is, are there any messages on that existing message list that people are like, what? We never said that. So any messages on here that are dead wrong? Anybody look at it and say, what? She said that is what we came up with in our group? All right. You can come back to me later if there's something afterwards where you're like, what? Go ahead, Al.
Okay, well, as I look at our list here, I think the one that to me is probably the most fundamentally important is the third one down.
Okay. Proactive, preventive approach.
What we're trying to accomplish here.
Okay. So core is proactive, preventive. I've heard a number of times today this idea that we want a community that is safe, healthy, fun. Healthy, safe, fun. So safety being a big, I just heard Joe say safe, yeah? Okay, other key messages. Others that jump out from this list are new ones that are not on this list that you really think need to be, that have been so important to your understanding around these tables, around why you're passionate about this. Yes, Katie. Number two. Number 2 says the and language. We've talked a lot about the and language, okay? Anything else? Anything I missed from our conversations? Yeah, Al?
The third one that I would add as being very key is probably the first one, too, the community issue. That has potential or does affect our entire community and all people living in it.
So the problem is in the whole community, and the solution is in the whole community. I don't know if we want to say it exactly that way, because then it's so negative focused, but something like that, okay?
That's public good, it benefits everybody.
And everybody benefits, that's cool too. So that's saying it more positively, right?
I think it's important to highlight the last one, that there's been so many people involved.
Okay. So process and stakeholders is important. This is, I hopefully will be able to read my own handwriting, but okay. Any additional thoughts about messages? People comfortable with some of the things that people have shared? Yeah? We don't have to rehash it all, but yeah.
I like the safe ride one, but I guess the reason why I like it is kind of lets you know that there was something in place before, and we're not the total creator of this thing that we've got into, and we're just trying to fix this thing we've got into to make it better.
Okay, all right. So we really want to look at improvement, I'm hearing in what you're saying. And the ordinance is not going to do all of it either, and that is a specific example. So we've talked a lot about that.
You may need to tailor the message to the audience. You've got 3 distinct groups that you're communicating.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Yeah, Brandon.
I know you asked this before, but I was writing something down. The 6th one down about safe rides home have never been and are not restricted anyway. I wouldn't use that because the perception is that they have been restricted. And if you go to a student group and say, you know, this isn't restricted, the perception is that they have been. I think you get negative feedback.
Yeah.
So I would probably not use that one.
Yep, okay. And I think that's going to be, we're needing to talk about the whole of the safe rides piece of it. So that's going to have to be an important piece of the conversation, yeah. Yeah, that sounds a little defensive almost, like there's, yeah. Katie?
Is this actual document going to go somewhere, or is it
This was a reflection of what we talked about last time. So my intent at this point was that it wasn't going publicly anywhere. But I think from this we could develop. So that's a great question. My thought, tell me if this would be helpful, is as all of us are out in the community talking about what the 6 wonderful meetings you've been part of and the next steps, is to have something, a resource for all of you to talk from. I mean, not that you bring it with you necessarily, but something that helps people just have a common common story in front of them. So it would be a resource for all of you. Some of that content would go into the public report to the city council, but we'd walk through, it would just be a reminder, we had 6 meetings, these are the, kind of what happened out of the meetings. Here are some key messages that you may want to use with different stakeholders. You may want to choose certain messages for certain conversations you have, whether you're talking, if I talk to my 21-year-old son, I might use different language as he's sending out messages everywhere in social media than I talk to my neighbor who's an elderly 90-year-old woman. Those might be very different messages. So. But a potential tool for all of you to have. Some of this content I could see going into language related to council, so we have internal consistency in the messages that all of us are using and the message that city council gets. Is that fair? Yeah? Helene?
I agree with Dana. There's a difference in opinion. I agree with the Safe Brides Home. That has a history, and the Tavern League, these have been provided before. I agree that you might want to take the last part out, but I think Safe Brides Home should somehow maybe be said as a strong consideration for this group.
Yeah, yep. So somehow talking about, we want people to, get home safely. Yeah. Okay. So key stakeholders and who you're connected with. So I mean, this is a bit of provoking you a little bit to say, what can you do? I'm facilitating these 6 meetings. It's not my job to say we're going to solve, well, maybe as my health department director job to say we're going to deal with alcohol misuse down the road. But around this table, it's now, what are all of you willing to do and say? We just got a great example of Dave already talking about process at the Tavern League. I know Kevin has already talked about process at the Third Ward Neighborhood Association, as have many of you in your different groups that you've gone to. Commitment to keep that conversation going is a question I have. You're not going to sign in blood today, but the ask is really that you use these resources as we get them out to you and talk this through, that we've not only gone through this process of priorities, we have a specific priority, a strategy that we are moving forward, okay? We do need to have a small group think about how we are going. You guys all identified all these groups: general public meetings, Tavern League meetings, student meetings, neighborhood association meetings. We will need a cadre of people to come up with a more specific plan for that communication. So I'd like some feedback from you all if any of you are willing to be part of that discussion, and as we had talked about the last meeting, being official stakeholders, maybe to go to different places, including to City Council. So feedback and thoughts on who you're connected with and what you're willing to do. This is not a I pledge to kind of discussion, but really thoughts on that. How do we move it forward? Because it's not going to be me talking to all of those groups. How do we? We said the message is going to be important. How are we going to do that? Feedback from all of you.
I think it's good if it's a multiple person, so police, fire, city official, neighborhood. It's not just one person as a spokesperson. It's a group of people, so they see camaraderie and community working together to get the message out.
So
Beth will do it.
demonstrating that multiple stakeholders. So not just expecting Helene to talk by herself Nick to talk by herself to Randall Park Neighborhood Association, but to have a couple of people that represent maybe some diverse perspectives around this table go with. Is that what I'm hearing? Are people?
That would show unity
yeah.
between the people in our community too. That
yeah.
Somebody from maybe police or fire is standing with somebody that owns
at the
tavern or some Tavern League, and we've come to this conclusion together and offering it as a good solution for our community.
So that's, I think, a great idea. Are people willing, if someone calls and says, I have, the student senate meeting in a week and a half, and we think that there should be a presentation, could you consider coming? Or if Brandon sends out an email to this whole group and says, I've got this meeting on this date, who would be available to show up? Are you guys willing to look at those emails and respond? Is that a fair opportunity? I'm using Brandon as an example, but any of us. So if Dave says, I have a Tavern League Association meeting, who could come to this meeting? And we would give some format for how you could present it. Does that seem fair? Okay.
I agree that the group that talks should be as diverse as
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Cool. Thank you for that. I mean, think about how powerful that is. You didn't even know each other before many of you didn't know each other before these meetings. So, all right. So I'm hearing, and I want to use the last little bit to talk through these, but I'm hearing commitment to say yes, at least occasionally. Not everybody has to go to every meeting. And that we will together identify the critical dates and meetings coming up, and that we will have a summary message document. That's an update, a little bit of an updated this that will be available. Is that fair? Am I missing anything? Yeah, Helene.
Where does the summary message document, who produces it?
I'll work on that after this meeting. I'll take an update of this, I'll put a couple of things together, and you guys can look at it and give me feedback if it's not quite right, or, I mean, I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you in both a Word document and a PDF. So we all acknowledge that, I mean, I think we have to hold true to the process and the content, but if you guys want to use it or pull things from it to make your own, like a little handout, then you could do that if it's in a Word document. Does that seem fair? Okay. All right. Energy, right? Yeah, Feline.
You know how in school you have to do the performance in the class?
Ah.
Wouldn't it be good to have like a mock-up?
Sure. So I'm open to having, you know, that kind of, we can put that out there if people want to come together, and that those of you that know you will have to be presenting, and if we want to get together, we can put that out. So I like that. Trial run, yeah.
Kind of the base I work with a lot. In general, in society, the attention spans are so short that if it's as
clear as mud. Yep, yeah.
Just one of those things where it's a piece of paper and there's bullet points and we feel questions, so be it. But if it gets into a long presentation, you're going to lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's going to be critically important. And I think feedback as we put a couple of things together to say, oh yeah, that's going to be really good. And I don't think anybody, whether they're young, middle, or old, you know, that kind of, none of us want to sit and listen to a lot of content. But we have to be comfortable with that we get enough there. Okay. All right, I'm going to shift that and I did this as you guys were thinking, and it's not exactly right, so you guys can push back. But I took 4 of them to say these are about the 4 that are have most of the dots. There are others that do. So this is policy ordinance related to property owners, policy ordinance related to alcohol access. So this is like the places that have alcohol available. Something related to safe rides, not necessarily. I'll just take policy ordinance off. This was the one that was merged together. And then I put together, because it was 6 and 6, so it was the next highest number, but they're all related to alcohol serving establishments. So even though you guys told me to keep them separate, I kind of put them together as things that seem to be priorities to this group as potential strategies that we need to work on. What I'd like you guys to share now, and take a couple of minutes to think quietly, but who is either already in this arena working individually as an organization or collectively in an existing group? So for example, there is, as Katie's introduced herself, there's a large community group that is called the High Risk Drinking Prevention Action Team. It's a group that is already meeting around some topics. Is that group working in one of these areas that they could take this on? Is the Tavern League already working on one of these areas and they could be the lead to take this on and get other people in? Is the university already working on one of these and they could be the lead to take this on? Do you see where I'm going? So think about either existing individuals, entities, organizations, or collaborations that are working on these already. Just mull that a little bit, those 4 areas. We will be done in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Including your own organization. I mean, make that a part of it.
to keep electronic resources that we all can have access to, you know, so that we can tailor it to the different audiences. I don't know if you guys have any kind of a shared drive, or is there a public site?
We could put it on our website. Thank you. Thanks for that note. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Margot. I'll just say Margot asked for a place where we could put all of the stuff that you guys could access it, a public site. So we'll think about where document stuff could be. So, all right. Thought enough? Who individually or organizationally would be in this world? Ordinance related to property owners.
I think that's the health department.
Oh! So the health department can be there. Who else? Inspections, so that's out of city planning and inspections.
Code enforcement?
Yeah, that's inspections, code enforcement. That's these guys. Who else? Is anybody working on the, I mean, the health department is already working yet?
I've heard, I put stickers on this.
Yep.
I've heard, I was gonna say the students, and have, I can't think of where it was, they have a contest. And, you know, whose house looks the nicest, whether they got plant flowers, or mow their yard nice, or whatever.
Yeah, so be creative.
A paint can, or whatever, get their landlord to do it. But there was some place like that, and it was like just this huge contest. And I don't know, they win $1,000 or something like that. But it was viable, and everybody got into it. I want to say it was Oregon.
Interesting. Kind of the nice house contest.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just.
Yes.
Funny. Cool. I would say the landlords as well, right?
Yeah,
So there's got to be
get
something.
the landlord into it, you know what I mean? Or you know what? They might have even got everybody that lived there. I think got rent free. Somehow it was.
Because they made it look nice.
Because
Interesting.
for a month. It was for a month, and I think that was it. I think everybody that lived in the house got their rent free. That was like the grand prize.
Interesting.
You get Menards to throw in stuff. Or Home Depot, I think it was out there.
So I hear neighborhood associations. There's the landlords. There's Chippewa Valley, who we tried to get to the table is Chippewa Valley Apartment Owners Association. What is it? So there's an association. I can't remember the name of it. I might be totally butchering that, but there's an association. Okay. What about? I'm sorry. Did I miss something? What about something related to accessing alcohol? So the kind of policy around alcohol access. Who? Who's got the lead there? The Tavern League definitely needs to be involved. Who would be lead in that? Nobody? Got to have someone willing to work on this.
And city council representative.
Okay. They would be the ones that if it didn't come from the city's attorney's office or some of the departments in the city, it would come from a council member saying, I'd like an ordinance related to, or I'd like to tweak an ordinance. I don't know exactly what we have on the books related to that, but.
Owners or managers of places that sell it.
Good. All right. Okay. All right. I'm moving. What about safe rides? This is where we've had our most conversation. Who should be the lead? Again, we've got this potentially could be a lead. I don't, you know, there's a couple possibilities here. Maybe city could be the lead related to this.
Yeah.
Students lead. Are you guys willing? Can I name you? To be the lead to say, yes, we're going to move, not that you have to do it, but that you're key to moving forward, okay?
Tavern League is in Safe Ride.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else?
Transit department?
Transit, yeah, that's interesting. And we don't have anybody really around the table related to that, but okay.
Cab and bus companies.
Yeah, so whether we could get someone from the,
Somebody with the wheels.
a driver. Is there a taxi, is there a group that, I don't think so either, but we could look at that.
Who licenses the shuttle license?
State license? Okay. UW Eau Claire?
Well, students, yeah.
Students, yeah, okay. So administration separately, or do you want to keep it just from the student end?
I'm glad to be part of it.
Okay, so we'll say UW admin. All right, I think we've got a really strong commitment to that. I think I heard Al say he was also committed to that, so I'm gonna put fire down. See, I remember some things.
Put us on that too, because we're drop-off for them.
All right, so Pioneer, Pickle, or other, or you guys recruit some other drop-off point. Okay. And what about this last one related to alcohol serving establishments? So the practices or the policy related to that? City Council.
I know there's already 2 members that want to make that a personal thing to look into as tied to licensing.
Okay.
And the course is taken through Tavern League.
Tavern League.
Your bartenders courses are taken through the Tavern League.
I think that's a really important group as well. The other group at the city that's involved in some of the practices related to alcohol, I mean, some of that happens even decisions about special events or those kinds of things. But yeah, what were you saying? Okay.
Do you need the city attorneys about?
I think city attorney, if this moves in from practices to policy, absolutely. So we have Kate. I'm sorry, police.
Is that something that the high-risk drinking there?
Prevention Action Team, yeah. Did Katie leave? Okay, I was waiting for her to say something and I just realized she's not there. So is anybody else part of that group? I'm not directly involved, but do we think that that's, so I think that this is a spot where they've had conversation before. High-risk drinking prevention action team. I agree. That seems like one of the logical spots where there's an existing group with a lot of these stakeholders around the table already where they could bring in some of these additional people.
I can't imagine that some of their strategic initiatives are
at least related to these two. Maybe not the first one so much, but
right.
All right. High-risk drinking prevention action team and high-risk drinking prevention action team. Additional comments? Yes?
I don't want to jump back to it from meeting 1, but I know alcohol alphabetically comes first. But
thank you.
You ought to stay on board with drugs and meth and whatever else they're doing. I just showed him a picture of a guy yesterday passed out. I go up to see him at 1 o'clock by the tennis courts at Owen Park, and there's no mention.
Yeah.
You know, I honked my horn, he's alive, and I was at making sure he was alive. Alcohol, yes, I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thank you for that because that's my mistake in not making sure the language from our strategies that we came up with, we were fairly, I think we've refocused ourselves over time on this is not just about alcohol, but the day that we talked about strategies and brainstorm strategies, many of them were bubbling up related to alcohol, but do know, so some of you may not know, but the Eau Claire County, not the government, but a broad collaborative group did come up with community health priorities, and that report was just published last couple weeks ago. And kind of newly taking a top 3 spot is substance abuse. So I think to reinforce Jed's point, there will be community focus on that priority. I mean, there has been. I shouldn't imply that there hasn't been. There has been, but I think some of the prevention strategies can fit there. What? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, so important. Thank you. Other thoughts? Because what will happen next is we'll take this, and as facilitator, I'll go out to these groups and say, how will we have the conversation next? I think I'm hearing, but correct me if I'm wrong, that we are going to absolutely next focus on this. We're not going to forget these others, but if we do nothing else in the next couple of months, we're gonna meet about this. We being at least some people around this table or your representatives here. Yes? We're not going to sit down as a task force again. You guys have done awesome work, but we will see each other, many of us again, with the hat on of we care about this topic. Fair? Additional thoughts. People are tired. I'm tired. Yeah. I get to go to a budget meeting next. Yeah.
Actually, neighborhood associations are very concerned about safe riding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Neighborhood association. Thank you. All right. So this is a reminder. We've basically talked about this, but council will get a report from me. That is, will be similar to the report I did in May, kind of formatty, but will include all of this content. But then they will get the proposed changes as Steve walked through to the March ordinance. We've talked about this, and I'd like to just end the last couple of minutes. First of all, really saying thank you. This ordinance discussion, despite work being done, there was a challenge in March, and I think the opportunity to come together in the same room and talk together has been really a powerful example of collaboration. It's not been perfect, it's not been easy, but I really appreciate everybody's effort and willingness to come back. To me, that's been the kind of evaluation check mark that people came back, so thank you for that. And been willing to have tough conversations. Some of you I've had tough conversations with individually as we've seen things in different ways, and I appreciate people continuing to get through that and keep talking. And I appreciate you coming back and being part of this. Everybody has contributed. That's also been powerful, so thank you. So my word of the day is appreciation to kind of evaluate. It's not just today, but through the whole. Does anybody else want to share a word about the process as a whole for today before we close?
I'd like to jump in as a group, maybe just give you a round of applause.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, this kind of stuff, facilitating tough conversations is really important to me, so thank you for that. It has not been perfect, and I apologize for the bumps in the road, but thank you. Any words to reflect back, kind of like, or productive?
Wow.
Wow. Process, wow.
Grateful.
Grateful. Why we live here. Isn't that true? Wow, I agree. Yeah, we wouldn't get this in a lot of other communities. Al? Unity. Yeah. We walked it, and it was hard, and we kept walking. So community, I heard. All right, thank you guys. You'll get communication from me. There may be asks to come to different meetings. There will be asks, I'm sure, to come to different meetings. Please communicate meetings that are coming up that you need. Just make sure you get that to me, and I will get it out to the group. I actually have a question for you. I have been blind copying all of you deliberately because of a request that we not send it out to everybody, so that because it's a task force, we worry about open meetings laws and communication back and forth. But I think if the task force is disbanded, can I use your names as a group list now and send it out to everybody with your email address? Is anybody concerned about your email address being available to everybody in this room? Okay, if you are not comfortable telling me that that is true, let me know, and I will take you off the group list. But otherwise, we'll use that as a way that you can communicate with each other, where, you know, Nick says the neighborhood association meeting is next week, who can show up, and we all see that. Is that fair? Okay, thanks sorry I forgot that process piece. Helene.
Can you just sort of explain to me, I'm a little lost, what the process, okay, we have all agreed to be committed.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, are we starting messaging?
Yeah, you guys can be
be
messaging away. We will have, in the next week or so, I will have for you documents to use. We'll have some of these materials put together in a way that you can just pull and use. And we will start anytime now communicating to each other about meetings. Okay?
When does this actually have to go?
Yeah, so we don't have a have to. The commitment was to wait until students got back. As we have conversations, I think and I'm sure Janessa and I would assume Dale, after they hear the outcomes of these reports, Dale Peters, the city manager, will have to at some point calendar the meeting, and then we'll make sure that gets out to people. But the commitment is that it's not going to be until there's been time, at least for students to process through. Yeah, and we'll use UW Eau Claire as a barometer. So.
Can you send the final ordinance to us when you make like your final changes?
Yes. That, and again, and I'm saying yes, I'm not the city attorney's office, but there's a commitment that you will have the ordinance draft as part of the communication.
Which I think is important. Otherwise, the communicating to people say, well, this is what you're telling me. What is
it going to change?
Yep. So I really think it's essential.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Also, could we get feedback? Let's say the students in a meeting. Could you shoot us an email saying how, like, disastrous or going better, or we've only had one?
Yeah. Or I need some help with this issue, or.
Yep. We meet every Monday night.
Yeah. Good.
Not in summer. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, it was interesting to hear that David already spoken to the Tabitha. By the way, I think he would be a good representative because of his background with state rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots
Jan
of.
was there too.
Yeah.
It was, we kind of just, how it all went, I think we were talking about something else, weren't we? And then we just rolled into it because it was an issue, and you know what? A lot of false information, once again, like Steve said, was out there.
Yeah.
And that, like I've said from the start, that just doesn't concern the students. That concerns the general public when that stuff gets posted or talked about the wrong way.
Yeah.
And
but you guys are great messengers.
Was it positive or?
oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So again, my appreciation. I will try and clearly communicate kind of next steps, content, process, and thank you very much. So, all right, go out into the humidity.
Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.